Have you ever, found yourself sitting in a room, maybe a crowded classroom or a high-stakes meeting at work, and you just get this sinking feeling that you're not the smartest person there?
Oh, yeah. Like, everyone else is just cruising along.
Exactly. Because you look around and everyone else seems to just get it immediately. They're nodding along, they agree with the presenter, and they're totally ready to move on.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're still sitting there, stuck on slide 2, turning a single idea over and over in your head, just trying to figure out all the variables.
Which can feel incredibly isolating.
Yeah, it really can make you feel slow, like you're somehow falling behind the rest of the pack. But what if your brain is actually hiding a high IQ in plain sight? What if the very behaviors making you feel out of step are the exact neuroscientific markers of a highly intelligent mind?
I mean, it's a profound shift in perspective, right? And
Yeah.
honestly, a really necessary one. We've been so conditioned to judge intelligence by speed, compliance, and, how quickly someone can just recite an expected answer. But neuroscience paints a vastly different, far more complex picture of how a truly sharp, analytical mind actually functions out in the real world.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are exploring a super fascinating breakdown from the YouTube channel Volton titled Psychology of People Who Have High IQ, backed by neuroscience.
Yeah, they did a great job aggregating this stuff.
They really did. We've got 10 subtle, scientifically backed signs from their research that basically reveal the hidden mechanics of high intelligence. Think of this as like a shortcut to helping you understand your own mind better. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So starting with what you might call the messy mindset. Because the way a highly intelligent brain processes thoughts in real time can look, honestly, a little erratic and strange to the outside world.
Yeah, we often carry this romanticized image of geniuses,
Yeah.
like they're these silent, stoic statues of deep thought. You picture someone staring out a window, perfectly still, having a eureka moment.
Right, the whole movie montage thing.
Exactly.
Mm.
But the biological reality of high-level processing is far more kinetic. It's very active. And quite often, it is physically noisy.
Literally noisy. Which brings us to the habit of talking to yourself. I mean, we all do it occasionally, right? Maybe muttering under our breath when we're trying to find our keys in a rush.
Sure. Yeah.
But the Walton video points out that highly intelligent people tend to do this constantly and at length, which sounds like a quirky habit. People definitely look at you funny if you're whispering a full monologue to yourself in the grocery store aisle.
They absolutely do.
But there's a fascinating study from the University of Wisconsin that completely validates this behavior. They found that people who verbalize their thoughts process visual information faster and actually retain complex data longer.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism at play.
Yeah.
Because when you're just thinking silently, your thoughts basically exist in your prefrontal cortex as a sort of jumbled, abstract cloud of concepts.
With a big web of ideas.
Exactly. They don't have a strict timeline.
Huh.
But the moment you force those abstract thoughts through the physical, motor process of speech, you are fundamentally changing how your brain handles the data. You are forcing your brain to sequentialize the information. You have to, assign syntax, grammar, and chronological order to your ideas.
Oh, I love that. It's like debugging a computer program out loud.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Like you can stare at the code in your head all day, convinced it works, but the second you read it aloud line by line, you hear the error immediately. Or it's being your own vocal sports coach while you're navigating complex reasoning.
Right, coaching yourself through it.
Yeah, you'll hear yourself say, all right, step 1, we adjust the budget here. Wait, no, if I do that, then the marketing timeline falls apart. You are physically externalizing the problem so you can look at it from the outside.
You're touching on a crucial neurological loop there. By speaking, you're utilizing your brain's auditory processing centers to double-check the work of your cognitive processing centers. It acts as a closed-loop system of real-time verification.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a weird quirk.
Not at all. I mean, Einstein was notoriously known for muttering his theories to himself as he walked around Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite literally the sound of the brain actively wrestling with, organizing, and stabilizing highly volatile, complex information.
That makes so much sense. And that intense active processing naturally bleeds into another major behavioral sign, which is the sheer volume of thinking, like the classic overthinker,
Yes.
replaying a casual conversation from 3 days ago, questioning every decision you made in a meeting, imagining 50 different outcomes to a scenario that hasn't even happened yet. It is so incredibly easy for society to just label that as pure anxiety or neuroticism.
It happens all the time.
But Volton clarifies this beautifully. It's not necessarily an anxiety disorder at all. It's a neuroscientific mechanism called metacognition.
Yeah, metacognition is such a brilliant concept. Put simply, it is the ability to think about your own thinking. Yeah. Let's look at how a typical brain operates. It observes a situation, reacts based on past experience, and just moves on. But a highly intelligent brain observes a situation, reacts, and then instantly creates a background simulation of its own reaction to analyze whether that was actually the most optimal choice.
So it's running multiple mental models of reality simultaneously.
Exactly.
So if you're stuck doing this, it's not that your brain is broken. It's more like your brain has the processing power to keep 50 browser tabs open at once, and it is insisting on checking every single one of them to make sure nothing was missed.
That's the perfect way to visualize it. Fundamentally, the human brain is a prediction engine. Its primary evolutionary job is to anticipate what happens next so it can keep you safe and ensure you succeed.
Right, survival.
Exactly. So a high IQ brain just generates a much larger, more nuanced set of predictive models. So when you find yourself seemingly paralyzed by a decision or replaying that slightly awkward interaction at the coffee shop, you have to frame it differently. You aren't spiraling. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do, analyzing thousands of variables to optimize your future outcomes.
Okay, let's follow that thread. Because if your brain is essentially a supercomputer that is constantly overprocessing, running complex simulations, and talking out loud to debug all this data, what happens when you force it into idle mode?
Oh, it protests.
Right. How does a brain like that react when you make it do something completely mundane, like folding the laundry or filling out a basic daily expense spreadsheet? That actually brings us to our next major theme, the restless brain, and the incredible susceptibility highly intelligent people have to profound boredom.
This is where we really have to dive into neurochemistry, specifically dopamine. Often, when someone simply cannot stand repetitive, mundane routines, they're labeled as unmotivated or even lazy at work.
Yeah, totally.
But it is an entirely neurochemical reality. Highly intelligent people just have a highly accelerated reward prediction system.
Okay, I want to make sure we really grasp this. I know dopamine is the feel-good chemical, but how does an accelerated reward prediction system actually make someone hate filling out a spreadsheet?
To understand this, we have to look at how dopamine functions as a learning tool. Dopamine isn't just a reward for finishing a task. It's actually released in anticipation of a reward to motivate you to act.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when you encounter a new task, your brain doesn't know the outcome, so it gives you dopamine to keep you engaged while you figure it out. But a highly intelligent brain figures out the underlying pattern of a simple task almost immediately. It maps out the entire spreadsheet process in seconds.
So the mystery is gone.
Exactly. Because it predicts the outcome so fast, the novelty vanishes instantly. The brain basically says, I already know exactly how this ends, and it just shuts off the dopamine valve.
So doing the dishes or filing that daily report feels physically agonizing because your brain is literally starved of its neurochemical fuel. It's just screaming, give me a complex puzzle. This is incredibly boring.
Precisely. It is the opposite of a character flaw. It's a difference in calibration.
Yeah.
The brain craves novelty, stakes, and complexity because those are the only triggers left that require enough problem solving to warrant a meaningful dopamine release.
Which leads us directly into a point where I have to admit I initially wanted to push back. The Volton research points to procrastination as a major sign of a high IQ. Now, I struggle with procrastination, but I've always viewed it as a personal failure. Wait, isn't procrastination usually just a sign of laziness or bad time management? How can deliberately delaying your work be framed as a sign of intelligence?
It is a very fair skepticism, And it's a common misconception we use to punish ourselves all the time. But we really need to distinguish between passive avoidant laziness and what psychologists at the University of Calgary have termed active procrastination.
Active procrastination. I mean, come on. That almost sounds like an excuse someone makes up when they're caught playing video games the night before a huge presentation. How is it active?
Well, think back to the dopamine starvation we just discussed. A highly intelligent brain fundamentally rejects busy work. If a task doesn't have immediate significant stakes or deep complexity, the brain literally struggles to engage the gears to start it.
So, what is the subconscious workaround?
It waits.
It waits. The brain deliberately delays the task until the deadline is so incredibly close that the potential of failing creates a high-stakes environment.
Oh, wow. So the impending panic of a looming deadline artificially creates the complexity and the massive neurochemical rush the brain needs to finally care about the task. Exactly. You've essentially weaponized your own fight-or-flight stress response to overcome the boredom of an unstimulating task. It forces the brain to go all in. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system, compensating for the lack of dopamine, and suddenly you have hyperfocus. That's why you might find that you consistently perform your absolute best work at the very last minute. The brain simply waits until the problem is interesting enough to solve.
That is mind-blowing, and it removes so much guilt from the equation, honestly. And it also makes perfect sense when you pair it with another classic trait, staying up late. You know, the quintessential night owl. Research from the London School of Economics actually found that people who prefer staying up late consistently score higher on intelligence tests. Why does this restless brain prefer the night shift?
Because the daytime world is fundamentally chaotic. I mean, if we look at everything we've established so far, a brain that is constantly processing multiple variables, running simulations, and desperately starved for meaningful, complex stimulation, the daytime is a minefield.
It really is.
It is full of trivial interruptions that completely shatter deep cognitive flow.
Right. It's the constant ping of emails, phone calls, someone stopping by your desk to ask a completely irrelevant question about lunch.
And every single one of those interruptions requires the brain to pause its complex background processing and divert energy to a mundane interaction. So the brain purposefully seeks out the quiet, low distraction environment of the night. When the sun goes down and the rest of the world finally goes to sleep, that incoming stream of trivial data stops.
The environment becomes predictable.
Exactly. And that is the exact moment the brain can let its guard down, let its active mind truly wander, and synthesize all the data it gathered during the day. That's when the big creative insights finally have room to emerge.
It's almost as if the brain needs the rest of the world to shut down just so it can hear its own thoughts clearly. Which is a brilliant pivot to our next section, the sensitized receiver. Because we just talked about why the brain needs a distraction-free sanctuary at night to do its best work. But what happens during those chaotic daytime hours? How does a high-capacity brain physically and emotionally handle the sheer barrage of incoming data from the world? This brings us to a sign that has frustrated me for years, being highly sensitive to background noise.
Oh, yes. Getting intensely, sometimes irrationally annoyed by the sound of a ticking clock, someone chewing loudly, or
Yeah.
just the low hum of an air conditioner. Sounds that other people seem to effortlessly tune out.
I always thought this was just being cranky or maybe having a lack of focus.
Yeah.
But Valton points out this is a symptom of heightened sensory processing.
Yeah, your brain is, at its core, a data gathering machine.
Mm.
A highly intelligent brain absorbs significantly more sensory data from its environment than average. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is a massive advantage, right? Absorbing more data points allows the brain to detect hidden patterns, recognize threats, and find opportunities much faster than others.
But there's a trade-off.
A big one. The biological trade-off of absorbing everything is a phenomenon called leaky sensory gating. You basically have a much harder time filtering out irrelevant noise.
It's like having a massively overpowered radio antenna. Like, it picks up every single frequency in the city, which is an incredible tool if you are trying to find a hidden signal that everyone else is missing. But the downside is that you are constantly flooded with exhausting static. You hear the ticking clock with the exact same intensity as the conversation happening right in front of you. Your brain is trying to process both as equally important data. No wonder it leads to overstimulation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this overpowered antenna concept doesn't just apply to auditory input like ticking clocks. It applies to how your memory functions, and profoundly, to how you process emotional input.
That perfectly explains the weird quirks in working memory then. I mean, think about your own day today. Did you misplace your reading glasses or completely forget where you set your phone down 5 minutes ago? Yet you can flawlessly recall the exact date a historical event happened or quote an entire scene from a movie you haven't seen since 2008. It feels like a total paradox. How can a brain be so smart but so forgetful?
It is a classic demonstration of how an intelligent brain assigns value to information. The working memory is actively flexing its ability to hold onto highly specific, interconnected data points that might be useful for pattern recognition later. The movie quote, or the obscure fact from a documentary, has narrative weight. It has context and complexity.
Whereas the car keys.
The physical location of your car keys does not. It is an isolated, mundane data point. As we discussed with dopamine earlier, the brain discards mundane data incredibly fast to save RAM for the complex simulations.
It prioritizes the complex narrative over the mundane detail. And this high-level data processing isn't just about facts and figures. It extends to people, which is one of the most surprising signs in the research, feeling emotions deeply. Empathy. Understanding others on a profound, almost intuitive level. Sometimes pop culture frames high intelligence as cold, calculating, and robotic. Think of the classic socially awkward genius trope.
Right, the person who doesn't understand feelings.
Exactly. But Volton argues that feeling deeply is actually a sign of neural sophistication.
That phrase, neural sophistication, is vital. We have a terrible habit in our society of separating logic and emotion, treating them as opposites. But neurologically, they're deeply intertwined. The exact same neural pathways that allow you to simulate 50 different outcomes for a corporate strategy also allow you to simulate the internal emotional states of the people around you.
So empathy isn't just a passive soft skill or personality trait. It is heavy computational lifting.
It is. You're running a highly complex background program. To truly empathize, your brain has to absorb incredibly subtle data points, micro-expressions, microscopic shifts in tone of voice, changes in posture. Then it has to synthesize that data through its mirror neuron network to accurately model what that person is experiencing internally. That requires immense cognitive processing power. Highly intelligent people don't just think deeply, they feel deeply because their brains are fully processing the emotional environment with the same relentless intensity as the physical environment.
Man, so let's step back and look at the whole picture. You've got a brain that's absorbing all this noise, simulating all these complex emotional states, constantly analyzing its own thoughts, and desperately seeking out high-stakes novelty. When a brain operates with that much firepower, how does it view itself? You would assume someone with all that processing power would walk around feeling incredibly arrogant and superior. But that brings us to section 4, the humble scholar. And the reality is completely the opposite. The irony is that high intelligence heavily breeds self-doubt. You constantly question your own abilities.
This brings us to a beautifully documented psychological phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I know the Dunning-Kruger effect generally deals with how a little bit of knowledge can make people overly confident. The guy who reads one article on a topic and suddenly thinks he's a total expert. But how does that dynamic actually apply to highly intelligent people?
Well, the Dunning-Kruger effect essentially maps out the inverse relationship between competence and confidence at different stages of learning. People with very limited knowledge in a specific area tend to vastly overestimate their competence. Because they don't know the landscape, they quite literally don't know what they don't know.
Right.
The horizon of their ignorance is very close, so they assume they've mastered the subject, therefore they are extremely confident. But as your intelligence and processing power allow you to see the actual complexity and the nuance of a subject,
The horizon moves.
yes, the horizon of your ignorance rapidly expands. You suddenly realize how incredibly vast the ocean of information truly is and how many variables you haven't considered yet. And what happens to your confidence? It plummets. The more you actually know, the more hyper-aware you become of your own limitations.
It's like knowledge is an island. And as the island of your knowledge grows larger, the shoreline, which represents your contact with the unknown, also gets longer. So if you are sitting there constantly questioning your abilities, wondering if your work is actually good enough, or worrying that maybe you're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, that self-doubt isn't a weakness. It is literally a byproduct of your own intelligence. You comprehend the complexity of the world far too well to ever be arrogantly confident.
Exactly. Your doubt is the strongest evidence of your awareness. And this feeds directly into the final and perhaps most important sign on Volton's list. You never stop learning. This is the ultimate sign, the one core trait shared by acknowledged geniuses across all of recorded history.
They read constantly, they ask questions, they seek better answers. Even when they arguably already know enough to easily get by in their careers or their lives, they keep digging. Because the high IQ brain is driven by that fundamental need to push back the horizon of ignorance, even just a little bit more.
And we should point out something very important to the listener right now. If we look at the very nature of this deep dive, the fact that you clicked on this audio, that you are actively seeking out dense information to better understand the psychology and neuroscience of your own mind, that action itself is empirical proof of this trait.
That is such a good point.
The desire to introspect, to gather data, to challenge your own assumptions, that alone places you squarely in that top tier of intelligently curious minds.
That is so validating. If you're here analyzing the mechanics of your own brain with us, you are engaging in the exact behavior highly intelligent people do. So what does this all mean? When we look at all these subtle signs together, the constant talking to yourself, the metacognition and overthinking, getting starved of dopamine by simple routines, using active procrastination to create stakes, meeting the quiet of the night, struggling with sensory overload, having a quirky working memory that prioritizes narrative, running complex empathy simulations, feeling constant self-doubt, and maintaining a relentless curiosity.
It means we desperately need to redefine our working model of what intelligence actually is. Because the most vital takeaway from the Volton research is this being smart has very little to do with the grades you got in high school. It isn't about standardized test scores or how fast you can calculate a math equation on a whiteboard. True intelligence is about your level of awareness. It is about your adaptability in complex situations. It is defined by your curiosity and your profound depth of thought.
It's the messy, noisy, hypersensitive, and profoundly beautiful way your brain interacts with the universe. So I want you to remember this the next time someone calls you too sensitive or too quiet, or tells you that you are too lost in your head. The next time that happens, I just want you to smile, because you now have the neuroscientific vocabulary to know that is exactly what intelligence actually looks like in the wild.
It is a highly complex system functioning exactly as it was biologically designed to.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to where we started. That sinking feeling of sitting in a room, feeling like you're out of step because you don't get it immediately the way everyone else seems to. Let's leave you with a final thought to mull over today. If traits like procrastinating because your brain requires higher stakes, getting easily bored with repetitive daily tasks, and being highly sensitive to environmental noise are actually scientifically validated markers of a highly intelligent brain, how many brilliant minds are currently being penalized or mislabeled as problematic by our traditional educational and corporate systems? Just because they don't fit the rigid mold of a standard, compliant, easily managed worker, how much incredible genius are we collectively leaving on the table just because it doesn't look the way we expect it to? Think about that the next time you feel like you don't fit the mold. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.